Alright guys, let's take a look at designs. This section is brief, but it does cover some of the more important things that you need to be aware of when you're setting up your research study so that you don't come across any hiccups or mistakes. The first thing about designs is that you can have designs that are more complicated than your simple one independent variable, one dependent variable setup. So these are going to be called factorial designs when you have two or more independent variables. That's especially for the categorical independent variables. So when would this come up? Let's say that you have the research question, people who exercise and eat healthy will live longer. Or that's really more of a claim than a question, but there you go. So how do you identify or how do you research this information? Well, let's gather data on people who uh, exercise versus don't exercise, people who eat healthy versus don't eat healthy, and see how long they live. So we could say that on average, people who don't exercise and don't eat healthy live for 50 years, and on average, people who exercise and eat healthy live for 80 years, and such and so forth for the other group of people. And it's called a factorial design because sometimes we call our independent variables factors. So here's one factor and here's another factor, and so they kind of get multiplied out to this factorial design where we have a 2 times 2 for different groups that we're going to be looking at. When we talk about factorial designs, we are going to talk about in terms of that 2 times 2 profile. So what we've got here is a 2 times 2 factorial designs because we have two independent variables and they both have two levels. So 2 here is for healthy versus unhealthy. 2 here is for exercise versus don't exercise. So it's a 2 by 2 factorial design. This is something that seems really simple, but that students very often get confused about. So just want to make sure that things are clear there. Another way that we want to make our research a design intelligent is by using control variables and being aware of confounding variables. A control variable is something that we use to prevent things messing with our results that we really didn't mean for. So if in the previous uh, experiment where you were looking at exercise and eating healthy, you wanted to find out, okay, well, uh, above and beyond uh, exercise, how does eating healthy affect your lifespan? You could say that we're just going to look at people who don't exercise. And in that situation, what you would do is hold exercise at no. And so you would control for the exercise variable by making sure that you only gather data for people who don't exercise. So the point of that control variable is to hold it constant so that we avoid a confound. What is a confound? A confound is a situation when an undesired variable affects your results. So if this comes up in lots of different situations where you have alternative explanations for research. For example, if let's say that you go to the mall and you measure the extroversion of boys versus girls, and you find out that there's no difference in extroversion between boys versus girls. You could have a third variable there, which is where did you measure the people. So at the mall, maybe everyone at the mall is extroverted because they like hanging out in a public space. So that could be a confounding variable because if you just measured people, say, in school, pretty much all boys and girls go to school, so you could measure extroversion there, and you might find out that girls are a little bit more extroverted on average than boys. And by avoiding the confound of the mall, you've made a better experiment there. So these are related issues because whenever you put together your experiment, you always want to be careful, make sure that you're not going to be affected by confounds. And one of the ways that you can do that is by introducing control variables. A simple set of ideas, but they can take you a really, really long way because every single experiment, every single research study is going to have many potential confounds and many potential control variables. There's nothing necessarily wrong with having confounds in your study or nothing necessarily right about having control variables in your study, but it's important to acknowledge those, be aware of them, and explain them when they come up.